These examples all come from a book that he put out around about the same time as the Darwin anniversary, uh, called "The Greatest Show on Earth." And but as you saw from the interaction there with John, and if you've read any of Dawkins' writings, his problem is not with us. His problem really is with God. And he a few years ago, again around about the time of the Darwin anniversary, he was involved in this campaign that was on London buses. Uh, and notice he didn't say there is no God. He probably wouldn't have been allowed to get away with that. There's probably no God, and in fact, it was a great opportunity for Christians. Well, there's probably no God. You've left it wide open. There probably is a God. Um, but his
Diane,
basis for that, sorry,
Diane, we're not
yeah,
seeing any pictures come up. Just the Dawkins
uh,
versus God.
Yeah, your slide. There we go. That's it. There we go.
right. Yes, some of you who live in Britain may remember this. There's probably no God. Well, that left it wide open for Christians to say, well, maybe there is a God. You've left it wide open. Now, in spite of the fact Dawkins insists that he is defending science, um, this campaign was promoted by, notice who, the Humanist Society, Richard Dawkins himself, and the Atheist Society or Atheist Campaign. So Dawkins knows where the real issue lies, even though he says he's defending science. The other thing we need to say is that bad design is not the same as no design. This is an argument that Dawkins uses quite a lot, and so do other atheists and skeptics. And in fact, what Dawkins is doing is making theological opinions, not scientific observations. He is attacking the character of God. He's not really making scientific statements. So don't be afraid um, to defend the science. And as I said, most of these three issues I've got here, we have quite a few on our fact file, come from this book, The Greatest Show on Earth, the Evidence for Evolution. It's mostly a rant against creationists. But anyway, he says he's defending science, so let's test some of his scientific statements. This is his statement about the vertebrate eye. Um, Send it back. It's not just bad design, it's the design of a complete idiot. Now, notice again, his problem is really with God. Um, and we dealt with this a few weeks ago, so I won't go into too many details. But if you look at the internal structure of an eye, you have light coming in the front where it is refracted or bent by the cornea and the lens system, which is just like sending light through a magnifying glass. And eventually that light gets picked up on the back of the eye, which is an array of light sensitive cells. Now, the interesting thing is the light sensitive cells are not in the immediate path of the light. There are several other layers of cells before you actually get to those. You may have heard of these rods and cones. And for a long time, this was thought to be bad design. Now, if you find something that looks odd, the scientific approach is to do some more research, not write it off as something that's wrong or bad. So some scientists initially in Israel and various other groups have looked at the retina, and they have discovered that in fact the retina, the back of the eye, is brilliantly designed because there are cells there called Muller cells or which convey light, and they also correct color aberrations that happen when you actually refract light through a lens system, which is just a basic problem of physics. It's nothing to do with the eye being particularly wrong. So, in fact, the retina is optimally designed, and this is a quote from the scientists who did the original research on this. The retina is revealed as an optimal structure designed for improving the sharpness of image. So Richard Dawkins should have taken notice of that before he got carried away producing his book. The original research for this was actually, that's dated 2010 there, but the original research was done a little bit earlier than that. And Richard Dawkins has all the resources of Oxford University to go back and do his research. Now, Dawkins had a couple of comments about Australian animals, as John mentioned. One is about the koala, and according to Dawkins, they couldn't have been created because their pouch opens downwards, which is not a good idea for an animal that spends its time clinging to tree trunks, according to Dawkins. Well, in fact, koalas are quite good at climbing trees, but they do have very short legs. So when they climb, their abdomen tends to sort of scrape on the tree surface. So an upward-facing pouch would actually collect bark and debris. It's not a good idea for a gum tree climber with short legs. In fact, the koala pouch is quite well designed. When koalas are not moving, and in fact that is most of the time, they spend about 18 hours a day asleep, they just sit well supported in the forks of trees rather than clinging to gum trees. So a little bit of simple observation would help Richard Dawkins. But going back to the koala pouch, it's actually well equipped with a strong muscle around the opening, which does keep it closed. And those of us who live with koala babies or koalas have not noticed any koala babies falling out of the trees. They're not in any danger. The reason that it is thought to have a backwards pouch is something to do with the way the koala baby feeds in between the time that it stops feeding on milk and starts learning to feed on gum leaves. Now, there is a transition phase there. At about 22 weeks old, a mother koala feeds her baby a sort of pre-digested leaf mix. So, and it's called pap. Now, this seems a bit gruesome, but this is made in the cecum, which is part of the mother koala's digestive system, and then is passed out in the droppings. And the baby actually eats this, and that gives the baby the right sort of microbes to line its own digestive system and get its digestive system ready to go on to eating a diet of leaves. And so what happens is that the koala joey leans out of the pouch in order to feed on the pap, which means it's going to stretch open towards the source of it, and that means it has to be downwards or backwards. So that it's not that the pouch is facing the wrong way, it's just that this is an observation people have made of seeing the koala joeys feed during this transition phase. So nothing wrong with the koala pouch. And then finally, another example we have is a nerve that Dawkins thinks is completely disgraceful, particularly in giraffes. Now, what it is a nerve called the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which is a branch of the vagus nerve. Now, vagus means wandering nerve. Human beings have a vagus nerve. In fact, all vertebrates do. And it's a nerve that comes out of the base of the skull and goes down the neck into the main body cavity. And this particular branch, called the recurrent laryngeal, branches off from the vagus nerve at the base of the neck and comes back up the neck. And it does end up supplying the larynx or the voice box. And so for an animal with as long a neck as a giraffe, Richard Dawkins think, well, this is a rather stupid design, isn't it? If to supply the larynx or the voice box of the giraffe. And this was another quote from his book. If you think of it as the product of design, the recurrent laryngeal is a disgrace. So Dawkins really is getting stuck into God. with these disgrace and idiotic. One day he will have to answer to God about that. So we really do need to pray for Richard Dawkins. He's getting on, and it won't be that far before he does have to answer to God for these words. But getting back to the recurrent laryngeal nerve, on its way back up the neck, it also supplies the esophagus and the trachea. It sort of runs alongside them. Again, if you find something that looks odd, the scientific approach is to do some more research. Don't write it off as bad or useless. In fact, giraffes work perfectly well. And so if Dawkins thinks he can design a better giraffe, well, he'd better consult God about that. But again, we're not scoffing at Dawkins. Personally, it's just these are some things he has said. He says he's defending science, but in fact, he's actually attacking God, and that's where his real problem is.